Today I'm coming to you from an echoey barn in the central coast of California because behind me is the all-new Subaru Crosstrek Wilderness. This is the third generation Crosstrek and the first time they've ever given it the ruggedized wilderness treatment. With over 9 inches of ground clearance, this is unquestionably the most capable Crosstrek ever built. Some might argue the most capable Subaru ever built, and almost without doubt, one of the most capable entries in this segment. Let's take a look. Unlike some of the competition, the Wilderness treatment is more than just a body cladding package, although obviously we get a lot of extra body cladding with the same sort of golf ball-like texture that we find in the rest of the Wilderness lineup. It now includes the grille, which has been redesigned for the Crosstrek model. In fact, the entire front bumper has been redesigned. And the big changes happen right down here at the bottom, where you'll notice we have these scalloped out edges, sort of like a Ford Bronco Raptor or something along those lines. We have hexagonal fog lights, a signature cue from the rest of the Wilderness lineup, gold accents for the recovery points both front and rear, LED headlights borrowed from the rest of the Crosstrek lineup. Now, about these recovery points, I love the fact that Subaru puts them up front. The gold badging, you might like it, you might not, but their location is very important. And the fact that we have 2 of them in the front is important as well, because sometimes you need to recover your vehicle from a corner or from the front, and you can do that with this arrangement. In something like the Pilot Trail Sport, it's way under the front right there. It's hard to get at it if you're stuck in mud, in deep snow, etc. It's definitely a messy process. And in a decent number of the competition, you just have to yank a wheel to recover your car. As you'd expect out of an off-road model, every angle has been improved: approach, breakover, and departure. And a lot of that has to do with the design of the front bumper and the added ground clearance we find as well. Again, that cutout section right there, we still have this air dam portion, but we then have an added skid plate right up front. Now, on the skid plate front, we don't have a complete set of skid plates on the Crosstrek Wilderness. There have been some supply chain issues, so you probably will need to add them aftermarket if you really want them. And there are definitely a lot of aftermarket packages available for every Subaru model. Whether or not they will return from the factory remains to be seen. Again, supply chain issues still seem to be a problem. Moving around to the side, the body cladding is definitely eccentrically shaped. That may offend some folks. I think it looks good in person, but let me know what you think down there. We have the same Geolander all-terrain tires that we find in the rest of the Wilderness lineup, but slightly different sizes based on the model, of course. These are 225/60R17, so a little bit more cushion than average for this segment, on slightly smaller wheels than average for this segment. Keep in mind this isn't upper trim, and that's all because you want extra cushioning for off-road duty. Let me know what you think about these black wheels. They're not my favorite, but I think this shape is really attractive. I just would rather have them in sort of a matte silver. From a distance, you'll definitely notice the eccentric shapes to the fender flares up front and, of course, in the back. Crosstrek emblazoned right there on the front doors in gold with the Subaru Wilderness badge up top. Let me know what you think about the gold accents. I really like the gold Crosstrek, and I actually wish the one on the back that we're going to take a look at in a bit was big and gold as well, because it really just accentuates the model that you've paid the extra cash for. Gold accents on the roof rails up here. The roof rails are still standard, and they're basically the same ones that we find in the regular Crosstrek. That's not really a problem because they're already pretty beefy in the regular Crosstrek. Suitable for 700 pounds of static load, just under 180 pounds of dynamic load. So think roof carrier, roof box, 180 pounds out on the road, roof tent with you and a couple Labradors, 700 pounds up top, not a problem. If you're wondering about this shape right here, it's all because of the fuel filler door right there. The gold mounts for the roof rails are still visible from the back. We have the same combination taillights we find in the rest of the Crosstrek lineup, so LEDs for the brake light and the accent light, incandescent for the backup light and the amber turn signal. As with the front, the Wilderness magic happens down here where we get a completely redesigned rear bumper with the same sort of cutouts we found up front, drastically improving the departure angle. This now has the best departure angle in the Subaru lineup. Of course, we have a big Subaru logo right there in the middle. Again, those gold recovery points, and as you can see, everything under here is really neatly tucked under. So we have the muffler right back there, and we have the differential right there in the middle. Again, if you want to get some additional skid plates, you can add those aftermarket, but from the factory, that's how things look. And lastly, no rugged off-road trim would be complete without some hood graphics, so of course we have that up here too. If you were hoping to see a turbocharged engine or a hybrid drivetrain under the hood of the new Wilderness, you might be a little bit disappointed. I know I am. But instead, Subaru did what is probably logical because the price tag of this is fairly low for this segment. It's going to top out right around $33,000 after destination. That is significantly less expensive than a Bronco Sport or, of course, even a Jeep Compass. So this engine makes a lot of sense in that respect. It produces 182 horsepower, 178 pound-feet of torque. To make it more off-road capable, the big change is the transmission behind the engine. It's been basically borrowed out of the Subaru Forester Wilderness. It has a more aggressive final drive ratio of 4.1. It also has a transmission oil cooler up front. The transmission upgrade enables the Crosstrek Wilderness to tow up to 3,500 pounds, definitely an improvement over the base model, and it's going to improve the off-road capability, giving us more aggressive ratios for more rugged off-roading duty. Unfortunately, Subaru doesn't have any fuel economy estimates for us just yet, but you can bet with the tire upgrade and the different final drive ratio, this is going to be lower than the regular Crosstrek. However, that's likely going to still make this one of the most fuel-efficient entries in this segment. If you want better fuel economy, you could get a Corolla Cross Hybrid, but of course, it's not going to have the kind of off-road capability we find in this. Now let's take a look at the inside. Opening the driver's door, we notice the all-weather floor mats that are standard, Subaru Wilderness logo right there. Very similar floor mats in the back without the Wilderness logo. We have gold accenting on the seats and the same sort of golf ball-like texture on this upholstery that we find in the rest of the Wilderness lineup. Although in this model, this is not real leather, this is the imitation leather product, which is probably going to be a bit more durable. This one has the optional package that gives us upgraded audio, power seats, and the power moonroof you find right there over the driver and front passengers' heads. As we see in other Wilderness models, the logo is embossed on the headrests, again more gold accenting and that texture to the upholstery. The front passenger seat remains a manual seat in this trim. Moving over to the front doors, we have the same theme that we find in the rest of the Crosstrek lineup with a combination of different materials going on. Softer materials in the upper section of the doors, harder materials on the lower section of the doors, and very similar trim. If I go in closer, you'll notice the slight color variations here. This is a very early prototype. Lots of things aren't quite right, so they're probably going to have that more dialed in for the final version. But it is sort of a two-tone color scheme going on, where the upper section of the dashboard is an injection molded component. We then get a hard plastic midsection. This section is also textured, but it's a little bit of a different texture than we find down here in this imitation carbon fiber section or on the seats. And then at the bottom, we find a really big bin-style glove compartment. For a lot of folks, the star of this interior is going to be the large touchscreen infotainment system in the dashboard. As far as feature content goes, this is positioned somewhere between the premium trim and the limited trim, although you can load it all the way up, as this model is. So we get the large touchscreen infotainment system with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto support, and a combination of touch buttons and physical buttons for things like the climate control. So you can see physical temperature buttons right there, but if you'd rather use that control, you can do that on the screen if you want to. Then under that, we have a Qi wireless charging mat, the same shifter that we find in the rest of the lineup, more gold accents right there. Toggles for the heated seats, so that way they can stay on. That is kind of a practical touch. Large cup holders, power outlet there. Again, you'll notice some of these slightly different colors and textures in here. I think that's going to be standard on this model. This is actually a lighter color than the seat fabric. It really gives it a really attractive look. You'll notice that over here as well. This section is slightly lighter than that section there, giving this that two-tone feel. Softly padded center armrest, decent amount of storage right inside there. As with other Wilderness products, we get gold accents on the instrument cluster, but the design is basically the same as the rest of the Crosstrek lineup. As is the 3-spoke steering wheel with the gold accent down there on the bottom, paddle shifters right there behind. X mode is controlled via the touchscreen infotainment system. This is one thing that I probably would change if I could, using a physical button instead, but we have snow, dirt, normal, and deep snow and mud, the same sort of modes that we find in the rest of the Wilderness lineup. Moving to the back seats, we find the same upholstery that we found up front with the same sort of texturing and the gold accents, but no Wilderness logos embossed on the headrests. This has the same sort of legroom and headroom we find in the rest of the Crosstrek lineup, and then we find those rubber floor mats down there standard, very similar to what we saw up front. Behind the manual hatch, we find another set of rubber mats back here, both on the rear seat backs and on the cargo area floor. And you'll notice how high these are. So they'll really trap a lot of water, mud, snow, things like that. Really cool textures going on there, that Subaru Wilderness logo. But under the load floor, we don't have a full-size spare tire. You probably could stick one in there aftermarket, but obviously that would compromise your cargo area a little bit. I would love to see an upgrade from the factory to get a full-size spare tire back here, even though it would reduce the cargo area a little bit. As you'd expect when we're talking about the best-selling small crossover in America, there are a ton of competitors. But when it comes to the Wilderness trim, things really narrow down dramatically to basically just the Ford Bronco Sport and the Jeep Compass, and certain versions of those only. Now, versus the Compass and the Bronco Sport, I think both of those models are very attractive, and there's certainly definitely reasons to buy them over the Crosstrek. They will offer you more power, they'll offer stepped automatic transmissions, and in the Bronco Sport, we'll get a torque vectoring rear axle that has a limited slip functionality. However, they're going to be more expensive, and quite a bit more expensive, because the price tag on the Crosstrek is about as low as the roofline, starting at $31,995. Plus, of course, the destination charge, which is around $1,300 to $1,500, depending on where you live in the US. And there's essentially just one big option package available. It's going to give you the power moonroof, the power driver's seat, and the upgraded audio system. That's definitely an option that I would select if I were shopping for a Crosstrek. And if I were shopping in this segment, it would be pretty hard for me to choose between these three really excellent entries as far as more rugged alternatives go. The Bronco Sport, definitely big and boxy. That pays dividends when it comes to rear seat room, cargo accommodation as well. But the roofline is going to be a lot higher than this. So loading things like those bicycles, kayaks, things like that on the roof, that's going to be a lot trickier. Also, it doesn't have as much ground clearance as we find in the Crosstrek, and the interior is not as long. So if you're the kind of person that wants to put maybe your snowboard inside the vehicle, going from the hatch all the way up to the front, this has a lot more room inside because it's a much more stretched format vehicle. This really has more of that mini Subaru Outback thing going on. It's certainly a bit more of a wagon, more of a lifted hatchback than we find in the Bronco Sport, which is really trying to be big and boxy, but in a smaller format. But that smaller format doesn't mean a smaller price tag, and that's really what the Crosstrek has going on here. Those top-end versions of the Bronco Sport get very expensive, and the Jeep Compass, definitely expensive as well, mainly because it has a lot more standard power than we find in this model. Clearly, if you want more towing capability, faster 0 to 60 times, etc., all of that stuff, you're going to want to take a look at the other alternatives. But if you want an easy to live with, excellent handling, and excellent riding alternative, definitely get the Crosstrek. I haven't driven this yet, but you can bet it's going to drive and ride very much like the current Crosstrek, blended with a little bit of the wilderness that we find in the rest of the Subaru lineup. And that makes it very easy to live with. Something like the Outback Wilderness has a really great ride, still decent handling, even though we have the all-terrain tires. These are not, again, the most rugged all-terrain tires, but they really give this that extra capability that a lot of folks are looking for. Let me know what you think about that, and are you interested in the new Crosstrek Wilderness? This is going to be on dealer lots this fall, and if you want one, now is the time to get on the really long list that is probably building at your local Subaru dealer. As we've seen with the current generation Crosstrek, they're going to be a little bit hard to find because it seems like everybody really wants a Crosstrek right now. Let me know what you think about all of that as well down there in the comment section below. Stay tuned, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so, because I will have my hands on one of these just as soon as possible, and I can't wait to put it through its paces because I'm really going to be intrigued to see how this fares on off-road trails versus something like a Forest or Wilderness, which has a very similar all-wheel drive system, very similar engine setup, and this has slightly different angles, especially that departure angle. It's kind of an interesting twist. See all of you later.